Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on a bit of an archaeological journey, something that's really shaking up how we understand early human history.
It certainly is.
We've looked at some recent articles, and there's a really key study in science to unpack, well, just how significant these new finds are. Our mission today is to explore what they tell us about ancient human ingenuity and, crucially, why they're challenging assumptions we've held for, a very long time.
Assumptions based often on incomplete evidence.
Exactly. And what's causing all the buzz is this. Imagine finding wooden tools, actual wooden tools, that are 300,000 years old, found in China.
It sounds almost impossible, doesn't it?
It does. And they're not just like interesting artifacts. They're astonishing because they force us to rethink where and how complex toolmaking really started. It challenges those old narratives.
Fundamentally.
So let's get into the specifics. We're talking about 35 wooden tools, dated pretty reliably to around 300,000 years ago. Discovered at a site called Gantangqing that's in southwest China. This isn't just another dig, right? This is something special.
Oh, absolutely. What makes this so incredible is why it's so rare. Wood, it just doesn't last.
Right. It rots.
Exactly. Microbial activity, oxidation, weathering, it usually breaks down incredibly quickly.
Right.
We're used to finding stone, maybe bone, things that endure.
Things that stick around.
Right. But wood surviving for hundreds of thousands of years, that needs really specific, unusual conditions.
So what were those conditions at Gantang?
Well, the tools were buried in these layers of sediment, ancient shoreline of Fuxian Lake. And these layers were low oxygen and heavy with clay.
Ah, okay. So kind of sealed off.
Precisely, like a natural time capsule,
Right.
basically starving the microbes of the oxygen they need to decompose the wood.
And that preservation is just so crucial.
Yeah.
Because finding wooden tools older than, say, 50,000 years anywhere outside Africa or Western Eurasia is almost unheard of.
Virtually non-existent, yeah.
So this East Asian discovery is incredibly unique. It really makes you think, doesn't it? How much our picture of the past, especially the Paleolithic, might be skewed because we mostly just find stone tools.
It has definitely overemphasized stone technology simply because it survives. Organic materials like wood, fiber, bark, they've mostly vanished. We get glimpses, but this is substantial.
It really makes you wonder what else we've completely missed. So, okay, they survived against the odds. What about the tools themselves? What do they look like? Are they just, pointy sticks or something more?
That's the fascinating part. No, they're not just crude sticks. The study shows they're mostly pine, a few hardwood ones too, and they have clear, undeniable evidence of being shaped and used by humans.
Like how? What kind of evidence?
Well, you can see distinct whittling marks, surfaces that were intentionally smoothed. They even seem to understand how to work with the wood, like incorporating knots into the design. It suggests real intention.
Wow. Not just breaking branches.
Not at all. And they found different types. There were these two large tools identified as heavy-duty digging sticks. Probably needed two hands to use them.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is their form. It's unique. We haven't seen this specific design anywhere else.
Really? So a local innovation.
It certainly seems so. Then there were 4 hook-shaped tools. The researchers think they were likely used for slicing through tough plant roots underground.
Ah, okay. Makes
Yeah.
sense for digging.
And then a bunch of smaller tools, clearly meant for one-handed use. The craftsmanship is, frankly, impressive for this time period.
How so?
Okay, get this. 32 of the 35 tools show intentional modification shaping at the tips, edges, or bases. 19 had microscopic scrape marks from shaping or use.
Microscopic.
Yeah, and 17 showed signs of deliberate polishing. Plus, there's evidence of heavy use, like actual soil bits stuck to the tips, and specific wear patterns from fractures.
That's detailed. It sounds like they really put these things through their paces.
Definitely. This wasn't accidental. It was skilled, purposeful work.
That level of detail is just incredible. But, with something so unexpected, were there any doubts? Did they consider other explanations before landing on skilled craftsmanship?
Oh, absolutely. The analysis had to be rigorous, but the patterns were just so consistent.
Right.
The choice of wood types, the specific ways they were shaped, those clear wear patterns. When you put all the microscopic and macroscopic evidence together, intentional human work is really the only explanation that fits. It holds up.
Okay, that makes sense. And what really strikes me is the purpose you mentioned. How do these tools stack up against other finds from around 300,000 years ago?
Well, that's another key difference. Think about famous finds in Europe from around this time, or a bit earlier, like the Clacton spear tip in England, or the Schöningen spears from Germany.
Right, those were for hunting, weren't they?
Yeah,
Games.
exactly. Primarily hunting weapons. But these tools from Gantangqing, they seem specifically designed for foraging vegetation, digging roots, processing plants.
So a completely different focus.
A completely different subsistence strategy being highlighted here. It paints a much broader picture of how early hominins lived, emphasizing plants in this particular region.
Okay, so if the tools point towards plants, what was life actually like there at Gantangqing? What was the environment?
The research gives us a pretty vivid snapshot. They analyzed pollen from the sediments and found evidence of 40 different plant families. This tells us it was a warm, humid climate, likely tropical or subtropical back then.
Wow, quite different from today in some parts of China.
Yes, and plant fossils back this up. Trees, vines, shrubs, herbs. The site itself was right by a lake or wetlands. They even found evidence suggesting the lake was pretty deep, at least 2-3 meters when humans were there.
And animals.
Animal fossils fit right in. Rhinoceros, turtles, various birds, including diving ducks. It all points to a warm, wet lakeside environment.
So given that environment and those tools, what were they actually eating? You mentioned plants.
Yeah, heavily plant-based seems likely. The site itself yielded direct evidence of things like storable pine nuts and hazelnuts.
Okay, good protein and fat.
Exactly. Also, fruits like kiwi, maybe raspberry-type berries, grapes, various edible herbs, even fronds.
Ferns. Interesting.
And crucially, given those digging and sluicing tools we talked about, they likely harvested aquatic plants too. Things growing in the shallow mud near the shore, edible leaves, seeds, and especially underground parts like tubers and rhizomes.
Which they needed the digging sticks for.
Precisely. And this whole picture implies a level of sophistication, you know?
How so?
Well, it suggests they weren't just wandering around grabbing whatever they saw. It looks like planned visits to the lakeshore. They brought specific purpose-made tools with them to get at those underground food sources.
Okay.
That means they likely understood seasonal cycles of plants, knew exactly which parts were edible and when, and had the technological know-how to make specialized tools for different harvesting tasks. It's a really smart, adapted way of life.
That is a level of planning and knowledge we maybe don't always associate with hominins that far back, which naturally leads to the big question. Who were they? Who made these advanced tools?
Yeah, the million-dollar question.
One of the study authors, Professor Bo Lai, is quoted saying, the most likely candidate is Denisovans.
And there's growing evidence to support that idea, especially looking at the bigger picture in East Asia.
Like what?
Well, we're finding more and more Denisovan fossils across the region. There's the Harbin skull that's over 150,000 years old, fossils from the Tibetan Plateau, Pingyu near Taiwan, even down in Laos.
Right, they seem to have been quite widespread.
Exactly. And the timing fits. It strongly suggests that during this middle Paleolithic period, Denisovans were likely the main hominin group occupying East Asia. These widespread finds make them a very plausible candidate for the Gantangqing toolmakers.
Okay, and what do we know about Denisovans? Were they capable of this kind of technology?
Well, Professor Lee points out they coexisted with Neanderthals up in Siberia, and they made sophisticated stone tools there comparable to Neanderthal tech.
Ah, interesting.
So he says there's no question that they are smart, they are intelligent, they are advanced. And finding sophisticated wooden tools certainly fits that picture of advanced capabilities.
And that idea
Yeah.
that Denisovans were this advanced in East Asia 300,000 years ago, that really hits at some long-held assumptions, doesn't it?
It really does. For a long time, the sort of standard view was that East Asia was technologically a bit stagnant during this period.
Right, the idea that stone tools didn't change much until modern humans, Homo sapiens, showed up much later, around 45,000 years ago, especially compared to Europe.
Exactly. Europe's Middle Paleolithic saw clear advancements in stone tool tech, Glavela technique, and so on. The picture in East Asia seemed simpler, maybe lagging behind.
But this discovery,
as Professor Lee puts it, revolutionizes our understanding. It shows sophisticated manufacturing skills, but in wood, not stone. The stone tools found at similar age sites in East and Southeast Asia do often look relatively simple, but maybe that's because the real innovation, the complex stuff, was happening with organic materials like wood, which usually just didn't survive.
So it fills a huge gap.
Yeah.
It suggests the apparent simplicity was just an illusion caused by preservation bias.
Precisely. It fundamentally challenges that old narrative and shows incredible ingenuity was happening right there, much earlier than we thought.
So let's pull this together for everyone listening.
Yeah.
What's the big takeaway? Why does this matter to you, to our understanding of human history?
Well, first, it massively expands what we know about early woodworking capabilities. It wasn't just spears, it was specialized foraging tools, unique designs.
And it wasn't just in Europe or Africa?
Exactly. It shows sophisticated wood technology being used in a totally different environment, these warm, humid East Asian wetlands, compared to, say, the colder European settings where we found things like the shoning and spears.
So it reveals just how diverse survival strategies were across the ancient world.
Absolutely. It shows that early human cultures weren't all following one path. They were incredibly adaptable, developing tools and techniques perfectly suited to their local environments. It's a story of diverse, local innovation, not just one group leading the way.
And I think it really underscores how much more we still have to learn. Every time a discovery like this pops up, it challenges what we thought was settled history.
It really does.
It reminds you that our picture of the past is constantly being redrawn based on what archaeologists manage to dig up and, crucially, what happens to survive. It's a living history.
It keeps us humble knowing how much might still be hidden.
This discovery, these 300,000-year-old wooden tools, it really reshapes our view of early human adaptability, their intelligence, their technological skill.
It really does. And it leaves you with a thought, doesn't it?
Go on.
If just one unique place with the perfect preservation conditions could hold on to these wooden tools for 300,000 years, what else is out there? What other crucial pieces of early human life, things made from organic stuff we just assume are gone forever? What if they're still buried somewhere, waiting for the right conditions to be found? Think about ancient diets, maybe even shelters, social structures, things we barely have clues about. What hidden knowledge is waiting to rewrite the history books again?
That is a fantastic thought to end on. What else lies hidden beneath the surface? Thank you for joining us on this really incredible deep dive.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time.